Game over, man. Game over.
Johnny. You're gonna need a bigger boat.
So serious.
Roll out.
I am Iron Man. This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the In Session Film Podcast.
Oh, welcome to episode 637 for May 19th, 2025, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us this week, everybody. We have a really fun show in store. I'm actually really excited to get into all the fun conversation we're going to have. To start off the show this week, though, a little bit of story time, because
something not so fun.
Not so fun, absolutely insane, though. As many of you know, I play beer league hockey. I have played hockey my entire life, and I am still playing, despite a few major knee injuries that I have sustained along the way. I continue to play each and every single week.
You dangerous man. You dangerous man. You like to live dangerously.
Yeah, it's a great time. So last night I had a game that I had before we were supposed to record this episode. We are recording this a day late because of what happened. So we are having the game. Our team is up 2-1. Everything's going swell. And then in the third period, something tragic happens where someone on the other team, his skate essentially gets stuck in the ice. This doesn't happen a lot, but it can happen, where the blade essentially gets stuck in the ice. His body was continuing to turn. Long story short, he fractured his leg in 3 different spots.
That is every time you say it, every time you say that, my leg just throbs.
It was
just throbs, man.
Pretty awful. He, of course, went down in severe pain, and it sent shockwaves through my body because I have been in his position. I haven't had that exact injury, but I've dislocated my knee several times. It is not fun at all. I would not recommend it to anybody. And he goes down. It takes a long time for the EMTs to get there. It takes a while to get him onto the gurney. I wholly empathize with him. And long story short, the game was prolonged by quite a bit of time.
Oh, yeah.
So by the time I was trying to get home, it was about the time we were supposed to be recording. I haven't even showered yet. I'm trying to get home. My kids are screaming their heads off, trying to go to bed. My poor wife is by herself.
I know.
It was chaos.
Yeah. At that point, I basically just said, JD, take some time with the family. I'll take the time to go and see Final Destination Bloodlines. It works out perfectly.
It worked out great. So we ended up recording this a day later, and it was quite the ordeal seeing that. And when he went down, I was on the ice. It happened right in front of me. So it was it brought
insane.
back PTSD, like of my injury and everything that happened. It was crazy.
We'll be thinking about that player. Hopefully he's okay.
Yeah,
and
hopefully he's okay.
Recovery.
Absolutely. We'll be thinking about him for sure. But not only did it prolong this episode by a day, I also thought it was a bit ironic because Friday night, this last weekend, I caught up with the Carson Lund film Ephus. I don't know if you've seen this yet, or not, Brendan.
No, I have not.
It is one of my favorite films of the year. I don't know if it'll go down as one of the best films of the year. It likely will not. However, I think this will go down as one of my favorite films of the year.
Okay.
And essentially what this is, I think you're going to love it, Brendan, because it is
I've heard great things about it.
Hangout movie. It's a hangout movie. And why it's applicable to this story that I tell here up at the top of the story, or at the top of the show, excuse me, is that it is essentially a bunch of guys that are our age, maybe a little bit older, that are playing in their version of beer league, but baseball. They're doing beer league baseball, and it's on a field locally to them that is about to be demolished because someone had bought up the land and they're going to build some corporate structure on top of the baseball field. So there is a sentimental element to the story aside from these guys simply wanting to play a baseball game.
This already sounds like, to me, a combination of The Sandlot and Everybody Wants Some.
Yeah, it's very much like that.
Oh my gosh,
is
this is my
100%.
favorite movie of all time.
Yeah, I'm telling you, man.
I haven't
you're
even
going to
seen
love
it, and it's my favorite movie. I need to
telling you,
watch this.
you're
Oh my
going-
gosh.
You're going to love it. It is an incredible experience. I was floored. I was absolutely floored. And I'm
Heck
telling
yeah.
you, if they ever make a hockey version of this, I will absolutely cry throughout the entire experience. I will be undone. And I was pretty floored by this film, even though I don't love baseball personally. I don't really watch it. It's not a sport
That's fair.
I really partake in these days all that much, even though I enjoyed it as a kid. But like these guys who are in their 30s, 40s, maybe early 50s for some of them, but they're in a similar stage of life as I am. They have jobs. A lot of them have kids and families that are all a part of this film and this experience in some way. But it is about a beer league baseball team having a game. That is the whole movie. The whole movie is them showing up at the park. They play 9 innings of baseball. The movie ends.
I need to watch this movie with my wife's family because they are very much a baseball family. My wife's brother actually did play for quite a while and was almost a pro prospect. He was a pitcher.
Okay.
And in fact, he coaches his son's league right now, or at least is one of the coaches. So this feels very much it's up our alley for sure.
Oh my gosh.
We have to watch this together.
It's incredible. Now, it is a bit of a comedy, so there are certain elements of it that are heightened. And I don't know how a pro prospect would feel about the heightened versions of baseball that we see here. But as someone detached from it, I certainly didn't have, like, I'll put it this way. I didn't get a Mighty Ducks feel from this.
Okay.
Like this is a film.
It wasn't a sports fantasy like that one is.
No. It might be a little bit heightened, but tonally, spiritually, it is much closer to Mystery Alaska than the Mighty Ducks.
Well, that's awesome.
This is a film that has reverence toward baseball, that loves baseball, loves the sport, and loves the people that loves the sport, which is what I was moved by, because that is my life, but with hockey. I love hockey. I play it all the time, as I just noted. I am 39 years old, on the verge of 40, mostly out of shape, but trying to stay in shape. Playing the sport that I love dearly.
I think we just found our next review.
Oh my gosh, I'm telling you, man. I would love to talk about it more. It is
all right.
It is incredible. And that's why, like, I don't know if it'll go down as one of the quote unquote best films of the year, but there might not be many movies that moved me more than that one did.
Well, if I have the same experience, then it will be one of the best movies of the year for me, because I'm at a point now where I don't really differentiate best and favorite anymore. To me, it's all kind of the same. Yeah,
that's totally fair. I loved it. No, I loved it. I was very much moved by it.
That's awesome.
I would love to
watch
review it here on the show. And it's a movie that is really about my life in many regards.
Coming soon to the In Session Film Podcast. Yeah, can't wait.
And so I watched that on Friday, and then I have my version of EFIS on Sunday, which I always really love. So there was that kind of spiritual connection to it. I just, again, hate that our game was marred by this horrible injury.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to hear about that, but
EFIS, I highly recommend it to everybody. It is really, really fantastic.
That's beautiful.
And, it's available to rent right now.
Okay.
So go and give that one a go. All right. On this week's show, we have a really fun top 5. We're going to do another top 5. A lot of us recently finished up Andor season 2 on Disney Plus. It's really, really great. So using that as inspiration, our top 5 this week is our top 5 characters that we want to see get the Andor treatment, which is to say characters that warrant a spin-off show or movie. That is the thesis of this week's top 5. I'm really excited to dig into that. Before we do, though, I do want to give a thanks to Nick and Gerald for having me on live stream for The Cure this past weekend.
Absolutely. Great work they're doing over there.
Yeah, I love getting to do that each and every single year. They're always doing great work, raising tons of money for cancer research. And we had a great time raising a bunch of money over the weekend and joining them. So I wanted to give them a shout out. Thanks for having me. You can still donate to Livestream for the Cure, livestreamforthecure.com. Please go and check that out. Donate to a great cause. And I want to say a lot of the content will be or should be available if you missed it and want to check out a lot of what Nick is doing over there. It's really great stuff. Livestreamforthecure.com. Go and check it out, though. Love that organization. Love what Nick and them are doing. So I wanted to give them some thanks. And I also want to say thanks to all of our In Session Film VIP listeners.
Yeah.
Last week, Brendan and we dropped some new bonus content. We're going to be more consistent about this going forward. And the latest bonus content that we did involved Brendan and I ranking the Mission Impossible franchise going into this newest one coming out this weekend.
Yeah.
The Final Reckoning. It has been dubbed. So that was really great. That was a really fun conversation. I recently went through all of the films. Once again, Brennan is doing the exercise as well.
Yeah.
And we've given our rankings. What was really fun about that conversation is that they somewhat changed partially way the way through the conversation.
I updated my ranking mid-conversation.
Like in real time. Yeah. It was
and
really
honestly,
great.
as I think about it more, I don't know if I want to reveal what major change I made. Maybe that's more for those who really should get an incentive to sign up. But I'll say the one movie that I shifted the most, which ended up shifting down a bit more as we were talking about it. You know what movie I'm talking about. I'm sure, JD.
Yeah.
I'm starting to think it's the worst one now.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, maybe that's something that we can discuss a little bit on next week's show. Once the film comes out, we can go over that once again. So if you're not a VIP listener, you can sign up a couple of different ways. Patreon.com/InSessionFilm. Sign up there. You'll get access to all of our bonus content. If you're watching us on YouTube memberships is a great way to get access to all of that bonus content as well. Or Apple Podcast subscriptions. All of those avenues will get you access to our VIP bonus content. So we really do appreciate those that support the show in that way.
Absolutely.
You have another week or so, and then we'll likely talk about that more publicly, that ranking, and also how Final Reckoning fits into our latest rankings. We'll go through that on next week's main show. So a little bit of a heads up there, but for now, you can go and check out that VIP bonus content. That was a lot of fun. That is interesting. I'm going to be curious to hear more about that next week and why you've dropped it down even further. I think I have an idea as to why, but we'll get more.
You probably do. It's something we sort of already talked about during that VIP episode.
Sure.
It's just those things that plague that particular movie are becoming more noticeable as I think about the franchise at large.
Yeah, and I've never been a big fan of that film. I've always been mixed on it. But I am with you. The more that I sit on it, the more that I watch it, I think its problems really do come to the forefront. And it's easy to get caught up in the spectacle because the spectacle is great. There's no denying it. But I think everything else around the spectacle, when you kind of remove the action, It's not one of the best ones in the franchise.
It's the best short
my
film in
money.
the franchise. I'll say that.
Yeah. No, that I
It has Lone Ranger syndrome.
That's a great callback for longtime listeners of the show. That is an amazing callback. Okay. Let's move on. Before we get to the top 5, though, let's talk a little Andor and Rogue One. So Brendan has not seen Andor, so we can't give it a proper full conversation here. And obviously, I don't want to spoil anything for Brendan, but
I've seen season 1. I've seen season 1, but I haven't seen
Okay.
season 2 yet.
Okay. I think this is, speaking of Andor, some of the very best Star Wars we've seen yet.
Yeah, been hearing that a
is
lot.
Incredible. Tony Gilroy, take a bow. What he created here, along with his team and Kathleen Kennedy. Gilroy has been
for letting it
very,
happen.
very publicly praising her that she championed this. She's a big reason this got greenlit to begin with, and that Gilroy was able to make the show that he wanted to make. Really, the only hurdle ended up being them taking the show from 5 seasons to 2.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was a budget issue, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so. Yeah.
So they had to shorten the initial inception of the show from 5 seasons to 2. But aside from that, Gilroy essentially got to make the show that he wanted to make. And God bless him, because my God, Andor season 1 and season 2 collectively, it is phenomenal. And I kind of want to kick myself in the rear, because when this show was announced, now to be fair to my past self,
Mm-hmm.
Rogue One, when it came out, it left a little bit to be desired for me. I don't think it was
Very
great.
mixed response.
And a lot of
that you and I
people
both
were.
had.
It wasn't just
Yeah.
me. It wasn't just Brennan. A lot of people were mixed on it. Some really loved it, and I'm glad that people do really like it a lot. Others, like myself, were mixed on it. And particularly, it's the characterization in that film. It's Jin and Galen are hollow and thin. Cassian, similarly, we don't really know anything about this guy.
He did not become an interesting character until season 1 of Andor.
Exactly. So here comes Andor season 1 and 2, and at the beginning of all of this, when they announced it, I was like, okay, I don't know how invested I'm going to be in a character that I didn't really care about in the film. So I was lukewarm on this being a project. Boy, I am eating that crow.
I think everyone ate that crow. At least those who are not a fan of Rogue One to begin with.
Yeah.
To your point, there were defenders of that movie when it first came out, especially given the spectacle of it, and the I guess the episodic feel of it, which definitely feels very Star Wars like. I definitely understand those praises that the film got at the time, but for those like us who were very distant from that film emotionally, we were all eating crow when we realized, wait a minute, there's actually some good characterization here.
Yeah.
Is Rogue One just going to be like this finale-like footnote to something greater? And apparently that is ultimately what it ended up being.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's incredible how you can recontextualize a character or a certain time period in a franchise, as this show does. And how it connects to Rogue One, I do think is interesting. I had someone reach out to me on Twitter in good faith to ask about Rogue One and how the show Andor seems to remedy some of the issues of that film. And it's interesting, right? Because when you're talking about a franchise, you're talking about how these things function in context, right, and how they work with each other. Because you could sit here and say, well, because of Andor, Cassian in Rogue One is a much richer character. You could say that. And on the flip side of it, how much does Rogue One and knowing where that character ends, how does that influence Andor? And I think that's a fair point to make because part of the show, a big part of the show really, is knowing that outcome.
Yeah.
So you do need Rogue One. You need to know where that film goes, what happens to Cassian in that film in order to really feel the stakes at the core of the show.
It's proper prequel making at its finest then. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I think the distinction for me is that with Rogue One, that is where we are introduced to those characters. And because it fails to flesh out Jyn and Galen and Cassian, that I found them rather hollow without the extracurricular works. And it's not just Andor, it's also the novel Catalyst that is really great. I don't know if anyone listening to this has read Catalyst or even knows that it exists.
JD and I have really both read it. It is a very, very good Star Wars book.
It's really, really great. So what Andor does for Cassian, that's what that novel does for Jyn and Galen. It is really, really good. Highly recommend it. Those two works of art together, Catalyst and Andor, yes, absolutely. It helps remedy the hollow writing of those characters as characters. It does make that film richer as a result.
Yeah, basically Catalyst, and to give credit where credit is due, it's called Catalyst, a Rogue One novel, was released in November of 2016, just 1 month before Rogue One was released, if I'm not mistaken. And it was written by James Luceno. And essentially what that novel is like what Andor is to Cassian Andor, Catalyst is to Jyn Erso. It's basically that.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why I wanted to point out why both of them work, because Andor obviously lifts up Cassian, Catalyst lifts up Jyn and Galen and that through line. And that's why Rogue One, I think, needs those things more so than Catalyst and Andor need Rogue One, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if in maybe a few months or a few years' time, we start to see some type of packaging of sorts between Andor, Rogue One, and Catalyst all together. I feel like out of all of these Star Wars novels that we were getting all within this, journey to the Force Awakens, and there were some pretty great stories at that time. You and I were both big fans of Lost Stars by
that's also
Claudia
really
Gray.
great.
Also, Bloodline by Claudia Gray as well was also a great Leia
also
story.
Very good.
Yeah, there were some great stories there, but I wouldn't necessarily say they were required to tie into whatever movies were coming out. Not like Catalyst into Rogue One. That almost felt like a package deal. And I feel like going forward, in order for Rogue One to really feel like it's of a piece within the Star Wars universe, we have to start seeing this as kind of a package deal. And I think a lot of people are. I see a lot of people very jokingly saying, this is my Star Wars trilogy now. Andor, Rogue One, and A New Hope. So it's like and I don't necessarily agree with that sentiment, but I get the point. I get the point that this is ultimately starting to become kind of a package deal, and I think we need to see it that way going forward.
I agree, especially for Rogue One, because the thing for me with Rogue One, and I did go back and rewatch it this last week in hindsight of Andor season 1 and 2. Rogue One, while I do think that Catalyst and Andor do lift it for sure, knowing the history of Cassian and Jyn, how those extracurricular works give nuance and texture to those characters, that film I still think is extremely messy. Like
it does not work as a movie on its own terms.
It doesn't work on its own terms. And even though, yes, knowing what happens in Rogue One, does it help Catalyst and Andor a little bit? For sure it does. But it is primarily the other way around. Like Rogue One, I feel like falters quite a lot without Catalyst and Andor, where on the other side of that spectrum, Catalyst and Andor, if you don't know what happens in Rogue One, you can still enjoy that you can still enjoy the novel and the show on its own terms and understand everything quite lucidly and feel the weight of the stakes and the emotion of it. Like all of that still functions really well on its own terms.
Right.
Knowing what happens in Rogue One or not knowing what happens in Rogue One doesn't really hinder those experiences all that much. But on the flip side, Rogue One, man, I don't think that film works at all without Catalyst and Andor, or at least until you get to the third act. The third act, I do think, is quite great. To be fair, I do think
great
that
spectacle.
Is
it's great spectacle,
incredible spectacle. But getting there is a bit of a sludge, and you can tell that film was held together by Scotch tape.
That was a compromised movie for sure.
It is extremely compromised, and even again, watching it, even in hindsight of Catalyst and now Andor, I still felt the same. Like I still,
gotcha.
You can still feel the movie barely being held together. Now, some scenes do hit a little bit harder, such as the moment after Galen, spoiler alert for Rogue One, after Galen is killed and Jyn confronts Cassian, they are in the ship and they have this moment of verbal sparring.
Yeah.
And Cassian is telling her, like, you don't know what I went through to get here. The sacrifices that I've had to make. Like, that rings so much harder in hindsight of Andor, where on a first watch, especially, and you don't know anything about Cassian, you don't know what the context is, his history, and up until that point in the film, it hasn't been brought up at all. At all. It's a moment that just rings hollow because we don't know these characters in any way, shape, or form. But given Catalyst, given Andor, together especially, that moment is some of the best Star Wars storytelling. But again, it's a moment that works because of other things outside of the film.
It kind of makes
more
me
so than the film itself.
It kind of makes me wonder if going forward, a movie like Rogue One is going to be, I don't want to say reevaluated, but as I mentioned before, this whole like repackaged deal that might happen with Rogue One in relation to Andor and even the novel Catalyst. Will we start to try to see Rogue One as more of a finale of sorts, as opposed to something that came first? And I feel like people are going to start trying to twist it that way. And in the same way that, let's say, a movie like Joss Whedon's Serenity was essentially a finale to Firefly that got canceled way too soon. Or maybe how we're going to see something like The Mandalorian and Grogu, which is essentially going to be a finale to The Mandalorian in some ways. It's still very different because that's going in reverse. That's treating it more chronologically. Shows came first that are then leading into their cinematic finales, and they're very much intertwined. But this is kind of the inverse of that maybe people are going to start looking at it in the same way. And I don't know if that's a good thing or not. It's just, Rogue One it's starting to find a very interesting place within the Star Wars chronology now.
Yeah.
And I just find that fascinating.
I do as well. The Mandalorian and Grogu, though, is doing something similar, but with The Rise of Skywalker.
Right.
That is a show that is now trying to fix that film and how it treats Palpatine.
Yeah.
They've set out to accomplish a very similar goal, right? Where it's like, okay, well, we messed up Rogue One. How can we fix this? Well, let's do an Andor show. Let's write a Catalyst novel. That'll fix it.
Yeah.
Okay, we screwed up Palpatine. Rise of Skywalker disaster. How do we fix it? Well, what if we made this show? And it's all about cloning. Like that's like The Mandalorian on its own terms. I love the character. Seasons 1 and 2, I do think are genuinely really good.
Season 1 is pretty strong. Yeah.
Season 1 is especially great. But broadly speaking, the broad plot is trying to fix the issues of Palpatine and the Rise of Skywalker. That's what it's all leading to.
So much damage control. Rise of Skywalker was damage control for something else, and now we're doing damage control for the damage control.
Yeah, that's what these shows have become in a lot of ways. And look, again, Andor worked great. Mandalorian, for the most part, worked great. So it's fine. It's worked out. But maybe we just don't have these egregious errors to begin with. maybe we don't do that. We just make good movies, you know?
Well,
Can we try that?
I hope that's what happens. I don't really have a lot of faith in whatever this Sean Levy directed Star Wars movie with Ryan Gosling is going to be like.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, I'm very worried about that. First off, I understand the tie into the video game Starfighter, but Star Wars Starfighter, just having the word star in there twice just is it's kind of a tongue twister in some ways. I just don't see that working. So I'm not saying that movie's going to fail because of its title. If anything, it's probably going to fail because I just don't think Sean Levy's that great of a filmmaker.
Yeah, that's it. Like, I would love to see a Starfighter movie. That sounds awesome.
Same.
With Ryan Gosling, hell yeah, sign me up. Who's directing? Oh, no. Can we get someone else, please?
Obviously this man is very busy working with Disney in other ways, but you know who would make a great Star Wars movie is Brad Bird.
Brad Bird? Yeah. I'm down. Let's do it. Bring him back. Yeah, I love Brad Bird. Before we get to the top 5, the last thing I'll say, Andor season 2, spectacular. I do want to have a full conversation on Andor at some point, whether it be here on the show or maybe we do it through VIP bonus content. Either way, I do want to have a longer conversation about it. There's so much to discuss with Andor. I loved every second of it. I cannot emphasize enough how well Tony Gilroy landed that finale. And those final 3 episodes, just remarkable stuff. Absolutely love it. And the final shot especially floored me. It is
That's all I've heard. I'm at a point now. I'm trying to mute Andor just so I don't get spoiled before going into season 2.
It is the pinnacle of Star Wars storytelling. I absolutely love it. All right, Brennan, let's talk about coffee. I love it.
Absolutely.
We need it. Well, we thrive off of it. And if you're going to drink coffee, exactly. And if you're going to drink it, as again, we all do, you might as well drink great coffee. You don't want to drink the bad coffee that requires you to pour in tons and tons of sugar. Like, sugar's not great for you anyway.
No.
So like you don't have to fill your coffee with all of this nonsense.
Yeah, if it's a coffee that's filled with defects that needs to be drowned out with other things that aren't coffee, then that might not be a good thing.
Exactly. You don't need that. That's why we love Coffee Cult, because they source specialty grade coffee from all over the world. They roast it in a very specific way. There's a process they go through to filter out all of those defects. So you're literally drinking the best coffee that money can buy. And you can really taste it in the coffee. It has these natural organic flavors of chocolate or oats, depending on what kind of coffee you're drinking, such as the Sumatra, for example. The Ethiopian Harar has these bright, fruity notes of strawberry and blueberry and citrus that I really love. So no matter what your palate is, they have a coffee for you. So go to coffeecult.com. That's coffee with a K, cult with a K, coffeecult.com. Use our code ISF25 and you'll get 15% off at checkout. That is 15% off. The code is ISF25. They have all kinds of single origin coffees, blends. I promise you're going to love it. So go check them out, coffeecult.com, code ISF25, and we thank them for their support. All right, Brennan, let's talk about swag and t-shirts. And
let's talk about Film Score Junkies. Film Score Junkies. Let's talk about that.
Exactly. I got my Film Score Junkies shirt. This is one of my very favorite designs that we have.
It's a good one. And I'm sure we have a lot of listeners out there that also appreciate film scores just like we do.
Look,
which means in order to prove that, you need a shirt to reflect that.
Exactly. If you're a film score junkie like we are, you got to have a shirt like this to wear it proudly. Which is what we love about this design that we got here. You can check that out on our store. We have all kinds of designs. We got a Sinners one, if you want to go and get a Sinners design shirt. We got
Yeah.
a design for the Substance that came out last year. We got a Lester Bangs design and a Rival design. We got all kinds of fun things. And of course, we got In Session Film logos. We got Women in Session, Chasing the Gold, all kinds of stuff. And if you want to support us, if you want to see all of our designs, you can go to insessionfilm.com/store or go to insessionfilm.dashery.com. That's who hosts all of our merchandise. Insessionfilm.dashery.com. Go directly there. You'll see all of the designs. I've even discounted a lot of them from the recommended TeePublic price that they have as kind of the default setting.
All right.
I've even lowered it so you can get a little bit of a discount normally. Exactly. So insessionfilm.dashery.com or insessionfilm.com/store. Either way, you'll see all of the stuff we have there. But go get a shirt. It's a great way to support us. We really do appreciate it. And you're going to look awesome when you go to the movies in your Film Score Junkie t-shirt. People are going
Absolutely.
You're going to get attention.
People are going to
that's
know
what we're all looking for.
That person knows their movies.
Exactly.
This person's important.
Yes. So again, insessionfilm.com/store or insessionfilm.dashery.com. And we thank you for your support. Okay. We'll go ahead and we'll leave Andor there. We'll circle back to it at another time. But again, using that as inspiration for our top 5 this week, top 5 characters that we want to see get the Andor treatment, whether as a series or a spinoff movie. We are going to be talking about characters that we're excited to see get a similar treatment there. So Brennan, with all of that laid out, did you have any criteria when considering this list?
Kind of, I think, or it just sort of worked out this way. First off, I do want to give credit to you, JD, because this was sort of your idea, this specific topic for this top 5 here. And credit to you for giving us what might be the hardest top 5 we've ever done.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, and what I love about this top 5 and why it is so difficult is that it's sort of impossible to do proper research for it. A lot of topics that we cover, we can do research, maybe see what other pieces have, done in the past, maybe similar top 5 lists in that particular vein. But this is purely subjective. This is purely just based on movies and properties we like. It's a very like what if kind of scenario, which makes it tricky. It makes it very tricky. And I wouldn't say I had any criteria per se, but it just sort of worked out that I did find myself avoiding films that would essentially feel like long-awaited sequels or prequels, as opposed to the whole spin-off kind of idea with Andor, for instance. Some of them might fall into that category, but I wanted to basically focus on what is a particular component that wasn't the focus of that original film initially, if that makes sense. Yeah, so that's the first thing. I'm also not really considering older movies for this one because in a lot of cases, if you want to look back at some of your favorite movies from, let's say, the 70s or 80s that you might want to see a spin-off treatment for, it usually might involve some type of recasting or something like that. And I'm trying to avoid that. I'm trying to think of something that feels more intertwined with the original property that we're referencing here. Sure. And this wasn't really part of my criteria here, this last point I'm about to make, but it just sort of worked out this way. I found myself looking more at filmmakers whose filmographies already feel like their own intertwined world. And there are a lot of filmmakers that already have that. I wouldn't call their films cinematic universes per se, but they almost feel like that. And my top 5 just happened to be in line with filmmakers whose films have sort of like a thematic or sense of place kind of tie-in between them all. And that just ended up being the case for me. So that's what you'll expect with my top 5 here.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun with this. I didn't have too much criteria, but I did look at this similarly to when we did our top 3 pilot duos that we wanted to see in Jaegers when we were talking about Pacific
that was a
Rim.
fun topic. Yeah.
That was really fun. And to your point, that was similarly an exercise that was purely subjective. You're just thinking about characters that together would make for a fun dynamic in some sort of way, whether it be comedically, dramatically, emotionally, whatever the case was. But you're having fun thinking of characters that could come together in a Jaeger and kick some alien ass. That's essentially what we were thinking of for that exercise. And I had a similar spirit here in the sense that we're looking at characters that we are intrigued by in some sort of way. What fun avenue could we do as far as a spin-off show or movie goes?
Yeah.
However, I did have a little bit of a caveat in the sense that I wanted it to make at least a little bit of sense artistically, dramatically, emotionally. I didn't want to take something that I thought was impeccably crafted and then try to manufacture something out of that. For example, Lydia Tarr. Would I love to see a spin-off show of what happened to Lydia Tarr at the end of that film? Absolutely, because that sounds incredible given the ending of the film. I think it would be a lot of fun.
It would, but man, does that mess with the thematic conclusion of that movie in a vacuum? I think it might.
I agree. Like, that film ends wonderfully. Do I want to upset that, or does it make sense to me? It did not. So while I thought of characters that would be fun, I don't know if there was cogency to it from an artistic perspective. So I did consider that. I did consider that for this list. That was really my only other criteria. As far as casting goes, while that was not top of mind for me, it did work out. My top 5 here, the actors could come back and reprise their roles easily.
Yeah, that basically is the case for me, whether it be a prequel spinoff or a sequel spinoff. Yeah, it definitely works out nicely for me.
So, with all of that laid out, are you ready to jump in here?
As ready as I'll ever be. And this could shift mid-conversation. I wouldn't say my 5 is set in stone. Because I have quite a few here that I think are intriguing to talk about nonetheless. But I'm as ready as I'll ever be.
Okay. And I'm kind of with you. I have 7 that I could easily talk about. Easily.
I have like 8 that I could easily talk about.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe 9. Maybe 10. Maybe 11. Maybe 12.
There are some good ones for sure. All right. What do you got at number 5?
Number 5, I want to be a bit careful with this one because this one probably would fall into that Lydia Tarr-like example where I think if we were to do this one or if we were to see a spinoff in this way, it might mess with the thematic ambiguity of this particular movie. I'm going to go to 2016 Sing Street. And specifically, I'm referring to, of course, my namesake, the character of Brendan, played by Jack Raynor.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good one. Yeah.
The reason why I'm being a bit careful with this one, and honestly why it's not ranked higher, is because part of what I love about that movie is sort of the fantasy-like ambiguity of its ending. It's sort of the what if of it all, whether Brendan's younger brother Connor really does leave for England with blanking on her name, with Ralphina. There is a little bit of fantastical energy to that movie. And I wouldn't want to mess with that. But at the same time, just given Brendan's love of music and how he's starting to find a newfound inspiration in his brother's actions, I could totally see Brendan becoming maybe sort of like the Lester Bangs of Ireland of that time. Becoming like a music critic, especially with that taking place in the mid-'80s. You know, bands like U2 and the Cranberries and the more alternative rock sphere have slowly been on the rise. I can see him finding a newly found energy in music, whether he be playing music or, like I said, maybe in a more critic or radio DJ like environment. I think that could be really fun to see, primarily because I just love Jack Raynor in that movie. I think he is quite terrific.
So good. He's very charming.
And that is very much the kind of movie I would love to see, whether it be done by John Carney or anyone else that has maybe a similar energy that could bring to that world. Maybe like a Cameron Crowe, for instance, if you were to go overseas for that. I think there's a great story there. I worry about it messing with the fantastical ambiguity of the film's ending. But nonetheless, I would be very excited if that were ever announced.
Yeah, I agree. The I think that's an idea that can have its cake and eat it too, because
Yeah, maybe.
I don't think that it has to be about anyone other than Brendan and where he finds himself in the
Yeah.
aftermath of how that film ends, where his brother goes off.
Yeah, you can
perhaps
just not
becomes a
mention
huge
Connor.
star.
You can just not
Yeah.
mention him.
You don't have to mention him at all. It can just be about Brendan, to your point, finding himself perhaps in the music scene, the local music scene, or maybe he becomes a critic, because there is a Lester Bangs energy to him for sure.
Yeah.
Whether he finds himself in the mix in some sort of way, and you just continue those witty just phrases that he has throughout that film.
Yeah.
Could be a lot of fun. And because he is a smart, insightful character, even if the motivation isn't always there. But that's a conflict that's fascinating about Brendan. That's really great. I would love to see that.
I could absolutely see it being somewhat similar to so I don't know if you've ever seen this movie, JD, and for those listening, I very much recommend a movie from 1991 called The Commitments. It's directed by Alan Parker, and basically that's a movie about an Irish man, a young Irish man starting a soul band in Ireland in around that time frame. So it actually does feature Glenn Hansard in a very early role. So he's actually in the movie. And apparently John Carney did use this movie as inspiration, whether he admits it or not. There is a bit of a Sing String light energy to it, but I can almost see the Brendan role taking on the centerpiece of that particular movie and almost working in a very similar way. So that's my plug for a movie like The Commitments. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. For my number 5, similar to what you just laid out there, this is more of a sequel spinoff than an Andor like prequel spinoff. And I don't know why I keep coming back to Will Smith with these kind of fun top 5s. But for my number 5, I'm going with Detective Del Spooner and Sonny the Robot from iRobot.
Okay.
I want to see a sequel series of them in the aftermath of iRobot, and essentially a buddy cop show or movie. I love their dynamic. Yeah. Will Smith has given some great performances over the years. His performance in iRobot is hands down, easily, for my money, the most underrated. It is a performance that nobody, aside from myself and maybe a few others, talks about. I think it is incredible. It is hysterical. There is a dry sensibility to Spooner that you just don't often see with Will Smith. And because the writing of so many of his performers, or for his characters, are to be overtly hilarious. And he's really great at delivering that kind of comedy and being a star of the 90s and 2000s. That's the kind of writing that lent well to being a star at that time. iRobot, the blistering humor of it is not in the writing. It's not the dialogue. The dialogue itself isn't what's funny. It is how Will Smith delivers that dialogue that puts me on the floor. It is really, really great. Like there's a heavy sarcasm to everything Will Smith does in that film that is so good. I absolutely love it. Now, if you don't love dry humor, then I can see why it might not work for you. I love myself a dry comedic performance, and the dry humor of that film I think is great. And while I did not plan this, you also get the Alan Tudyk motion capture performance a la Andor with K2SO in that show. So he's doing a similar thing in this theorized prequel that I am proposing here. And I like at the end of that film, as Spooner is still somewhat wrestling with his prejudice toward robots, there is some really great dynamic between those two characters that I think is great. That can be continued on as they're some sort of buddy cop duo taking down bad guys in the streets. However, Chicago looks in the aftermath of that film. Crime, I'm sure, is still rampant. There's still a lot to figure out. And them two going to the streets and trying to take on all of that with that comedic dynamic, I think is really great. I would love to see it. That's my number 5 here.
Yeah. Kind of like a Lethal Weapon like energy
Yeah.
with that. Yeah. Or like a 48 Hours like energy, that movie
like
with
a
Nick
48
Nolte and
hours.
Eddie
Yeah,
Murphy. I think that might be a
exactly.
better comp for something like that. I could see that working. And you're specifically seeing it as maybe more of a series than, let's say, a movie or something.
Either
like
one.
that.
Either one. But yeah, I think it would be a lot of fun. Just like that kind of like a 48 hours energy. And a little bit of what you see there at the end is they're trying to work together, and they just like there's a conflict there as much as there is like a bond that is forming. Like continuing that into the series, I think would just be incredible. I would love to see it. And I just want to see that kind of performance in Will Smith once again, because it's been such a long time. In fact, I don't know if we've ever seen anything like it before or after from Will Smith in that regard. It's such a singular performance in his career that I love.
I think it's a very underrated performance as well. I don't love the movie I, Robot as much as you do, but I think the thing that works best about it is that central dynamic between Alan Tudyk and Will Smith. I think that's great. I think it's really good.
And that's really all. Like, what I'm asking for more than anything is the vibe, the comedy, the tone. The writing around all of that can certainly be better than what you see in the film, for sure. Similar to what we saw with Andor, right? Like, it's a similar tone, but the writing is so much more heftier. The emotion is felt. The characters have more nuance. If you're not a fan of I, Robot, that's fine. I'm not asking you to be a fan, but I think if we continue that sensibility comedically in terms of that dynamic between Sony and Spooner, you can certainly elevate the material around that to be something more Andor-like than Rogue One, like, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So.
I think that makes perfect sense. That's a great pick.
All right, what do you got at number 4?
Number 4 is, so I have a specific pick for my number 4, but it's sort of a placeholder for something grander. One filmmaker that came to mind pretty much instantaneously when you threw out this topic, whose films that I do almost feel like their own cinematic universe, that's Paul Thomas Anderson. I feel like all of his films in a way feel intertwined, especially given that they all take place in different not timelines, but different time periods. But they all still seem to be some type of reflection of sociopolitical energies in America. And I feel like you can throw any example there, given how much his films feel like ensemble pieces. The one that came to mind that I thought, I would love to see this actress do more work in this kind of vein. I picked Alma from Phantom Thread, played by Vicky Krieps. Maybe a prequel style movie. What did she go through that gave her such agency to push back against a man like Reynolds Woodcock? And I think the movie does already have that. The movie Phantom Thread does give us some insight into that, given how strong her performance is. There's a lot of nuance in that movie that I think makes that movie so great. I think, if anything, it's more so just an opportunity to see an actress like Vicky Krieps really shine once again. And I think she's really terrific in that movie. She's been really good in a lot of movies, but she's picked a lot of strange movies since Phantom Thread. Also working with M. Night Shyamalan in his movie Old as an example. But I would love to see her tap into this type of energy again. And I think there's a potentially interesting story there leading up to their first quote unquote meet cute at what I guess is that diner of sorts. I think there's potential there, and I love her performance enough to see it again. So that's it's my number 4 right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if I think on it harder and I start to feel like I would actually rather give the slot to, I don't know, someone from Boogie Nights or Magnolia or something like that, because all of his films have those opportunities to explore side characters even further. And that's what makes his movie so great. So if anything, it's sort of a Paul Thomas Anderson placeholder, but Alma from Phantom Thread was the first one that came to mind that I thought of.
Yeah. See, this is a really interesting one because I think depending on the direction is where I would be interested or not.
It's
because
dangerous territory.
a sequel, I have no interest in. That's the Lydia Tarr thing we talked about earlier.
Agreed.
A prequel, though, about Alma and what led her to the events of that film, now you've piqued my interest. That I do think is interesting. That could be really fun. So that is where I agree with you. That's a little bit of a fork in the road. Where are you going to take this?
Yeah,
but that is the right avenue that I would be interested in seeing, for sure. Good stuff. All right, for my number 4, this is, I guess, similar. Like, it has to be. Well, there is no other avenue. There's only one direction here. It has to be a prequel. But there is a sequel TV show that already exists. It takes place 15 years after the events of the film. I haven't seen the TV series because I don't do mainstream television at all. However, I am very interested in Alonzo Harris from Training Day with what led to him becoming this fully embraced corrupt cop that we see in that film.
Okay.
Now that I think could be really fascinating, especially with Denzel Washington at the helm there. It would certainly involve some great makeup work to de-age him by about 25, 30 years. And maybe you could use some CGI in there as well. But dramatically, I think there's a lot to chew on here, right? Because one can assume that when he becomes a cop, it's not in bad faith. He wants to become a cop for some good reason, I think we can all assume. So let's explore how this ambitious, maybe even idealistic young officer slowly rationalizes compromise in the name of justice. That I think could be really fascinating to see because he is quite ruthless in Training Day. Yeah. And it is a powerhouse of a performance. It is Denzel at his very best. That doesn't just happen overnight. What is it about, maybe something he sees on the streets? Maybe it is, informants doing things that makes him recoil. Is it institutional power that ends up blinding him? Whatever the case is, I think there's a lot to chew on there. And while we've seen elements of that before, there's something about that character in particular, especially with Denzel, that gives it more electricity than if it was, something created from scratch. So like that is where I think this as a spinoff has power, and I would love to see it. I think that would be great.
So just to be clear, are you thinking prequel energy leading up to the events of Training Day to contextualize that attitude of his, or maybe even something that takes place after?
Well, he dies at the end.
Right.
So,
right. That's
yeah.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert for Training Day.
yeah. Because I know that. I was just, I guess I was trying to get the energy there, because the reason why I bring that up is this would clearly have to be a recast situation. So of course, who would you get to play him? John David?
Well, that's why I was saying, like, I don't think you have to. Like, I think you can cast Denzel and de-age him through makeup, through CGI, as I noted earlier. So I think you can have Denzel in this role. And I honestly, I wouldn't want anyone else. I would rather spend the money to de-age him through makeup and CGI or some collection of the two, but keep Denzel, because you need that spirit. Like, the energy he brings to that role is singular. It's only Denzel can replicate that kind of a performance. Not to say that anyone else can't do it. There are a lot of great actors that can make Alonzo fascinating, but there's something about that performance, and we have Denzel. So I think we can utilize that energy through an Andor like, again, series or movie, however you want to frame it. But I think you can keep Denzel in that role, again, explore those layers and what led to that, because it's not something that just happens overnight. And it's not.
You're right.
What is the compromising factors? That's what I want to know.
it's just so easy to think of someone like John David when he was clearly channeling his dad's energy in the piano lesson from last year. Uh,
Yeah.
and of course there's always something dangerous about that type of de-aging technology, but I feel like we're getting much better with it nowadays than we were, let's say,
I
10
think
years
so.
ago.
Yeah, especially like, like what we saw with Samuel L. Jackson and Captain Marvel was pretty seamless. So like I think when there's a dedicated framework to it, it's pretty great these days. And it doesn't have to be exclusively CGI. I mean, great makeup artists out there can de-age a character as well. So if you want to have a marriage of practicality and CGI, I think you can make that work. And I love John David Washington. I think he's a really good actor. And you are right. He does channel his father very well in the piano lesson. But typically, I do think he is a different kind of performer from his father. And I say that complimentary. He's not trying to bring out a different version of his father. He's not trying to replicate his father. He's his own actor. And I do admire that he has that identity.
Yeah.
For the most part. Can I see him replicating an Alonzo Harris type of energy? Honestly, I don't know. Maybe, but I'm a little hesitant just because for the most part, I've seen John David create his own identity separate from his father. I don't know. We have Denzel. I would just rather use Denzel. Let's it's such a singular powerhouse performance that I think we can make it work with today's technology. And I think there's a lot to mine out of that character for a prequel series of sorts.
No, I think that makes sense. Yeah, I'd be interested in that for sure.
Okay, that is my number 4. What do you got at number 3?
My number 3, I'd probably want to put this one higher, but it's one of those movies where I feel like I can argue any character from it is one I would like to see a spin-off treatment for, and I just don't really know who, so I can't really put it any higher because I feel like the character itself can shift. But I know I would like to acknowledge the movie Almost Famous and one of the many characters from that one. Selfishly, I would love to say Lester Bangs, but I would not want to see someone else play that role.
Yeah, for real. Yeah.
I feel like as much as I would like to see Kate Hudson return to the role of Penny Lane, I feel like they did a great job crystallizing her arc in that movie, even if I do think there's more to the story, but there's something bittersweet about that, which I guess leaves Elaine Miller, played by Frances McDormand, or maybe Russell Hammond, played by Billy Crudup. Those are the two I keep going back and forth on that I think have a lot of potential for a really fascinating story. Looking at it from maybe the motherly perspective of Elaine Miller, maybe looking at it from maybe the time period of the 90s or something like that. Cameron Crowe has explored the 90s before in a movie that I think is severely underrated, Singles. So he's very much tied to that world. So maybe he can look at it from the motherly perspective in that, or from the musical perspective from Russell Hammond. And I've always had a fascination with this idea of artists who had a moment of success only for that to fade away due to the changing times and what that means for them, what they're doing now. I always think that means they have great stories to tell and how they're trying to fit in a more contemporary world that maybe doesn't really welcome them anymore. And I think that's maybe where Russell Hammond has the most potential for a successful sequel spinoff. And I would love to see Billy Crudup in that world again. I think that would be a really, really touching one. Certainly speaks to me being the musician here of the In Session Film Podcast. I would love to see what he's doing in the later decades. I don't know what that decade might be, but given his tie to 1970s rock music, that was very much of a time. And in many cases, in many horrific cases, many of those who made it big then just couldn't find that longevity. And does he have that same story to tell? What does he do differently, if anything? I think there's a lot to explore there.
That is really interesting. Is there any interest in seeing what happens with William? Is he able to continue his success, or is that a one-hit wonder?
So
does he want to be in this world because of what he experienced and with what Lester Bangs taught him throughout all of this. I think
Yes,
there's also some fascinating things there too.
I definitely agree. I think part of the reason why I didn't go with William was because I was trying to not fall into the trap of this being more of a long-awaited sequel as opposed to a spinoff. And because even though I wouldn't necessarily say
that's fair, totally fair, yeah.
yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say William is the quote unquote main character of Almost Famous. It's very much an ensemble piece. Everyone has an arc of a sort,
Yeah.
but it is through his perspective. And if we were to stay with his perspective a second time, then all of a sudden this feels more like
It feels more
Almost Famous
sequel
too.
than spin-off.
Yeah. And I was, even though
Fair.
I do think there's a story there, and I would be very interested in seeing that, I just don't know if it fits the criteria of what I'm trying to do here. That's why I
No, that's
deviated.
fair. Yeah, totally fair. And I think from that perspective, Russell or Penny makes the most sense.
Mhm.
Outside of a Lester Bangs, but you're not going to recast that role.
No,
No
no.
shot.
I'll boycott the movie if it does that.
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree. Okay, yeah. That I would love to get back into that world again. With those characters, absolutely. Sign me up. I think that would be great.
And Cameron Crowe needs a return. He really does.
Yeah,
So
yes.
maybe the best way to do that is to go to a world that he's explored before.
Exactly. Yeah, maybe. That is the world we live in, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of filmmakers are doing that these days. So good stuff. All right. My number 3, I will admit, Brennan, this is my most hypocritical pick. Because
Okay.
because I do think this falls into that Lydia Tarr territory we mentioned earlier. Does this character need a spinoff? No. The final images that we see with him at the end of this film, it is cinematic poetry. It is breathtaking. It is phenomenal. We really do not need a spinoff movie or TV show. However, this is me being selfish. This is me pandering to my own biases and what I want to see. That's what this is. I am admitting that up front. Okay? So with that said, my number 3, Farrier from Dunkirk.
Oh
the
my
Tom
gosh.
Hardy pilot.
Oh my gosh. You're
Yeah.
right. That is very much a Lydia Tarr like scenario.
You know,
I'd love
'cause-
to see it, but I also would not want to see it.
Look, what we see at the end of that film with the burning plane there, it is fantastic. It is really, really great. It is one of my favorite shots in any Nolan film, for sure. Would I like to see Farrier shooting down Messerschmitts throughout the rest of the war? Maybe he's involved in the Battle of London, one of the most pivotal events of World War II. Would I love to see that? Absolutely. Sign me the hell up. I want to see that. I want to see him in the night sky in the Battle of London becoming an ace and shooting down all of these. Like, yes. What happens to him throughout the rest of the war? Because the other fascinating thing, and again, I say this very complimentary about Dunkirk, but he is a vague character, right? And that is purposeful in that film. We're not meant to know much about those characters. But if you do want to expand on Farrier, you know, what led him to becoming a pilot, or again, I'm thinking this more as a sequel series because Dunkirk happens really early on in the war. So what becomes of him during the war and maybe even after the war? What is his life like as an RAF pilot during the most pivotal sequences of modern history? And I've told this story before on the show, but to reiterate, the RAF pilots, if they do not win the Battle of London, world history is drastically different.
That's true. That's true.
Drastically different. There's a version of world history where today we are having this podcast in German. It's very possible. If England loses that battle, they probably go on to lose to Germany, and who knows then what happens with the United States after that. But Germany probably goes on to dominate most of Europe at that point. There's no one else to stop them except the United States.
Right.
If the Battle of London went the other way, those RAF pilots are true, incredible heroes that won that war in many regards. Is Ferrier a part of that? And if so, to what degree? What does his involvement look like? Again, I say this very selfishly because
I could tell.
That just
I can
speaks
tell.
to me.
This is a movie that is just made for you and no one else. Doesn't get released.
It might not.
It gets released on your laptop, and that's it.
Yes, but I do think that also, like film, just film history. There's not a lot of great World War II like dogfighting movies. I think there's so much to mine here. Now, obviously, during the 40s and early 50s, there were a plethora of war movies from that time for sure. And some of them were very good. But I don't think that generally, especially in terms of if you want to couple it with action sequences, the 40s did not have the technology we have today to create an action spectacle like we see with Mission Impossible, for example, or even going back to Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor and the way he shoots the dogfighting sequences in that film, which I still maintain are elite. Those are excellent sequences. Say what you will about the rest of that film, and the rest of it is debatable.
Very.
Okay, I get it, but those sequences are really, really great. So, like with today's technology, like we just don't see a lot of aerial combat movies. The last one we got was the George Lucas produced one in 2013, Red Tails. I can't remember who directed that film, and that wasn't a very good movie. That's an amazing story, but the film itself, I think, left a lot to be desired. And generally in the modern cinematic landscape, there isn't a lot of these. Like I feel like we've seen more like on the Star Wars front than we have like the historical battle front. So like I think there's a lot of room in the sandbox for this kind of movie as well. So I think that coupled with
without it feeling the need to feel, like very heavily tied to Dunkirk specifically. Exactly. Like you can almost make it in a way where it just becomes a World War II movie that happens to feature Tom Hardy. It might not necessarily be required viewing to see it alongside Dunkirk. It could work on its own.
Yeah. Just like the Austin Butler show that came out last year. Like you don't need to see
Masters of the Air. Yeah.
You don't need to see Band of Brothers or the Pacific one to see that show. Like that show works well on its own. And that show is more about the bombers in the sky than what I'm talking about in terms of the fighter pilots of the RAF and even some American pilots that joined the war early on. So like that's like I'm talking about that specifically.
Yeah, I think that makes it more digestible. I feel like doing it that way allows it to maybe fall into those pitfalls you mentioned earlier, like with Lydia Tarr, where it would disrupt the thematic intrigue of the original movie where that character comes from. I feel like allows that separate experience to then feel like it stands on its own. And maybe something you could do is you don't necessarily need Christopher Nolan to be the one to make it.
No, you really wouldn't. I mean, you could have Tom Hardy come back and reprise the role, which I would love. I mean, Tom Hardy would kill it as that in that role for sure. But yeah, I agree with you. You really wouldn't need a Nolan to come back and do that show. And it can feel quite separate. It can be more about the Battle of London, the stakes involved there, his own personal life. What does he have? Like, does he have family at home? Like, how does that affect his choices? Like all that stuff. I mean, you could still have a minimalist style if you want, if you want to carry that same tradition from Dunkirk over, but it doesn't have to be reliant on Dunkirk. Like this is just more about the character and utilizing it to tell a story that fleshes him out in a new and different way than what we saw with Dunkirk. And it would also scratch that itch for me personally with my own, again, selfish biases here.
Well, I think doing it that way allows it to scratch your itch while still feeling like it doesn't, for lack of a better phrase, piss on the legacy of Dunkirk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's a nice middle ground that way.
And maybe it's a tie-in to Pearl Harbor because Ben Affleck's character is one of those American pilots. So maybe Affleck shows up in a cameo because that's the world we live in now, right?
Now you're pushing it. Now you're pushing it just a little bit.
Okay, maybe we don't do that. I was thinking, how could we Avengers this? Okay, who could be the Thanos of this new show or movie?
I might talk about that a little bit later. There's one pick I have that is kind of an Avengers-like extension of something else, but I'll get to that later.
Okay. All right, so that is my number 3. Your number 2, Brendan.
My number 2 is going to be the clear Brendan pick here. I mean, all mine are very much Brendan picks, as I'm sure you would agree, JD.
Yeah.
But I'm sure you're waiting for me to acknowledge this movie and maybe even this character. But take everything I just said about Russell Hammond and Almost Famous and the reasons why I would love to see him. Switch rock and roll with baseball, college baseball, and you have my number 2 pick. I'm specifically talking about Finnegan from Everybody Wants Some, played by Glenn Powell.
Of course. I mean, look, this one does make a lot of sense because Glenn Powell is everywhere these days.
Well, that's one reason why. That's one reason why I thought of it. I think there's a selling point there for sure.
Yeah.
And selfishly, I think he should have been receiving some awards contention for that performance, and Everybody Wants Some. I think he is truly transcendent in that movie, and it's clear how he became a big star. Even just looking at that performance, you could see such a movie star persona in him. But similarly to what I talked about with Russell Hammond and Almost Famous, and you think about how an artist like that, how would they thrive in an era where they're maybe not as accepted anymore? What about Finn's post-college baseball career? What if he was a pro prospect that never got essentially drafted? What does his life look like afterwards? Is he just a philosophizer? Is he just what is he doing? Playing like a beer league baseball or something like that?
Maybe he becomes a hitman with all these disguises.
Okay, so I guess I got to take this off my top 5. We've already seen this movie then. That's a good point.
Maybe.
That's a good point.
Again, you have to think about the cinematic universe here, Brendan. That's what we're trying to sell. That's what the studio executives, that's how they think.
That's true.
Right?
That's true. And again, this is another filmmaker where I feel like Linklater's films do feel like they are weirdly tied to each other. They almost feel kind of like a cinematic universe. Cameron Crowe's films are kind of like that too. I mentioned that earlier with Paul Thomas Anderson.
Yeah, exactly.
So Linklaters are kind of in the same vein. But if I had to pick anyone, you know how much I love Everybody Wants Some. And the fact that we were talking about baseball and movies earlier in this conversation makes this all the more appropriate, I guess, to tie it up. But I think of all the characters in that movie, and I love watching everyone in that movie and their overall dynamic, Finn's the one that I think has the most potential for an interesting story, just given his charisma, given how intelligent that he is, even despite his childlike nature. I think that makes for a very interesting character arc and what that could mean maybe in the 90s or something like that if he never got the chance to play professional baseball. I think there's an interesting story there. Could be a dramatic one. Doesn't need to be a Linklater movie, although I would love it to be. For all we know, maybe Linklater's already made it and he hasn't released it yet. For all we know.
Who knows? That's very possible. Yeah.
But I could see something like this one actually working. Like I could see this one actually making sense and being a selling point where people don't feel like it's unnecessary. I think there's a worthy one here for sure.
Okay, so I want this really for one major reason, and I think it's one that you're gonna very much agree with. Glenn Powell in 2025 is one of the most marketable actors we have working right now.
Absolutely.
He's as close to a modern day movie star as we'll get today with the current cinematic landscape. So they release that Glenn Powell is going to be in this baseball, again, movie, TV show, however you want to label it. I think given that marketability, it's going to pique the interest of a lot of people that probably have not seen Everybody Wants Some. They don't even know this film exists.
Mm-hmm.
But because of this new movie with Glenn Powell, they will probably learn at some point, oh, this is a spinoff to that movie.
Yeah.
And they'll go, oh my God, well, I love Glenn Powell. This sounds fascinating. I want to go see that movie. And it's going to point people back to Everybody Wants Some. They're going to go and watch it, and that will be the major victory.
I'm all for that. Yeah, that's a great point.
I agree.
That's a great point. It's basically our way of saying more people need to see Everybody Wants Some.
Exactly. Cinephiles, critics, sure, a lot of us have already seen this, but there's certainly a major contingent of people that don't even know about this film. And that would be a great way today to get people to go and see that film. It's hard to believe, but it's been almost a decade since that film came out.
I know. As I was putting this list together, it almost makes even more sense to do this now, given how much of a star Glenn Powell has become in the last 10 years. But this movie's 9 years old. It's absolutely insane.
Mad Max Fury Road just celebrated its 10th anniversary. Like last weekend was its 10th anniversary in theaters. And that's crazy to me.
I remember reviewing that movie on this podcast with you.
Same. Yeah, we had Tim Costa on the show, I believe. Oh, it was a great conversation. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. 10 years. 10 years since Fury Road. 9 years since Everybody Wants Some. But yeah, a great film. I love it as well. And I would totally be down. I'd totally be down to see that, especially because Glenn Powell, he's one of the best we have.
He's the man. He's the man.
Okay. My number 2, I think I'm going to get a lot of people on board for this one. And I wanted to have this here at number 2 because I think I am going to rub some people the wrong way with my number 1. So this is your balance. Bring everybody together. Yeah, this is the balance. I'm balancing out the force, bringing everyone together.
So basically, you're doing the opposite of what Al Pacino says in The Godfather Part 3. Every time I push them away, every time I bring them in, I then push them away.
Exactly. We'll get to that here in a moment. Right now, I'm bringing everybody together.
You're bringing everyone together. Okay.
We're all here for the cookout because we're all going to sit down and we're going to watch a spinoff movie about Estelle Faust for Mission Impossible.
Yeah, this is an honorable mention for me.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would love to see this, right? Because she's such a fascinating character in this franchise. Did not love how she went out. However, she is certainly one of the more compelling characters in this franchise. And I think there's certainly a lot more to explore with her as this Ethan Hunt of sorts agent, but with MI6, the secrets that she has, the adventures that she goes on.
Yeah, the Furiosa of the Mission
Furiosa
Impossible
exactly. I couldn't have said it better myself. And I would love to see what that was like, how she got in with the syndicate. What was that like? And I know that Rogue Nation gets into that a little bit, but I think there's certainly a lot more to her story, much like what we've seen with Ethan Hunt throughout all of these movies, all of these years. What is her story that led her to the events of Rogue Nation? I think that's something that we would all love to see. It's a great performance and a really great movie, and I would love to. I would love it. And I think, like, in a more, like, obviously we're having a lot of fun here, but seriously, considering something like Andor, for example, with our inspiration here, Ilsa Faust, given a 2-series arc to give more emotional weight to that character, now that we know that she ultimately crystallizes in a Cassian kind of way, I think a prequel series could, similarly with Mission Impossible, and part of this is I don't love Dead Reckoning. We're that before.
Basically, we're acknowledging that Dead Reckoning is now the Rogue One of the Mission Impossible franchise, essentially.
Yeah, basically. And because of what happens in that film, I think the character is very much underutilized in the same way that Cassian and Jin is underutilized, at least from a writing perspective, not so much from a plot perspective. but the way that we like, they just feel thin despite how involved they are with the plot. Speaking of Jyn and Cassian in Rogue One, there's like this thin veil to them. That's how I felt about Ilsa Faust in Dead Reckoning. She's there. She's there for a majority of that film, but what is she really doing there? Like, it feels underwhelming to me. And look, I get it. We saw her in Rogue Nation. She's a big part of Fallout. That was her third film in the franchise. And I know Rebecca Ferguson was kind of wanting out of the franchise, but because she's such a pivotal part of it, I don't know if crystallizing the character in that fashion made sense. It certainly didn't make sense from a storytelling perspective.
It's less so the crystallization and more so the way it was handled.
That's ultimately what I'm leading to. Like, I don't think it made sense from a storytelling point of view, but especially from an emotional perspective, it felt really contrived and manufactured. And I think giving her more of a due, and maybe the prequel is the events between Fallout and Dead Reckoning. Maybe that's what you focus on specifically, because you pick
that's
up
actually not a bad
desert.
point. Kind of do what Black Widow did by taking
exactly.
taking place in between Captain America: Civil War and the post-credit scene of Captain America: Civil War.
Yeah, essentially. And maybe that's what it is. I mean, when I came up with the pick, I was thinking about, I guess, also similar to Black Widow, because that film flashbacks to when she was little and becoming a Red Sparrow. Is that the name of it in that film? I can't remember. I'm
think
blanking
so.
on the term.
I'm blanking on that too. Or is that the name? Or is that the name of the Jennifer Lawrence movie that she was in from director?
There's that too. I think it was kind of similar though, if not the same.
Yeah. I think
there was like similar terminology there. At any rate, like my thinking initially here was, there's so much to tell about the character prior to Rogue Nation and where it leads up to Rogue Nation that I think would be really interesting. Especially given the back and forth with MI6 and how she, is disavowed similarly to Ethan. There's a fascinating narrative there, but given that also a lot of my frustration with the character and partially why I wanted to have her on this list is because of my frustration with Dead Reckoning. Maybe it's more about remedying my frustrations with Dead Reckoning, a la Andor and
I mean, that's kind of the basis of this whole top 5, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not just about what we want to see next, but it's also about finding ways to remedy something that maybe didn't work originally.
Yeah, that could be it. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's really great. I'm glad we had this therapy session. We really worked it out. We did. That's really what I want. I just want to remedy Dead Reckoning. So we got there. We got there eventually.
That's a great honorable mention for me, Ilsa Faust from the Mission Impossible franchise. Maybe even at first I thought maybe leading up to the events of Rogue Nation, but I think maybe having it take place still within the Mission Impossible timeline, but in between the events of Fallout and Dead Reckoning might even make more sense. Turn it into that desert movie and where she ended up at the beginning of Dead Reckoning, and what that story is there. That makes a lot of sense. It didn't make my top 5 primarily because I had a hunch you were going to have it, or at least we were going to talk about it in some way, because it feels like a very obvious pick, but that doesn't negate the fact that we should be talking about it. It's a worthwhile one, and one I would absolutely be interested in seeing.
Yeah. I mean, now that we've talked it out, I feel kind of silly in some ways because I don't know if I would have had her on a top 5 without Dead Reckoning. I do really like the character. Obviously, I love her in Rogue Nation and Fallout, but I don't know. I don't know if it would have cracked the 5 for me.
Well,
but
in a way,
I am feeling something after Dead Reckoning, though.
It is the most appropriate given how this entire topic we're talking about was inspired by Cassian Andor. because it basically is the most comparable to that situation, right?
It is very comparable. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
So
I
in a
agree.
way, it's probably the most appropriate pick of the night.
For sure. Okay. On to our number ones. What do you got at number one?
My number one, so it's not really a cheat. I am using 2 films for my number one, but it is still the same character.
Okay.
And it's a cinematic universe of sorts that I think had a lot of potential to work, but we never saw it go anywhere outside these 2 movies. And I would love to see it happen. And much like with Glenn Powell in my last pick, we are seeing a bit of a resurgence with this actor, Michael Keaton. So I would love to see him come back as
Batman? Okay.
No, not
Just
Batman. Even though Batman's actually my honorable mentions for a different reason. But I'm talking about Federal Agent Ray Nicolette from both Quentin Tarantino's Jackie Brown and Steven Soderbergh's Out of Sight.
Okay. Interesting. That's inspired. Okay.
Maybe as a retired agent or someone that's still in the game at his age, and somehow tie it into new adaptations of Elmore Leonard's novels. He's written many novels over the years and sadly has passed away in 2013. But some of his most celebrated novels outside of just Rum Punch and even Out of Sight, novels like City Primeval or La Brava or Glitz. Get Shorty was also adapted in the 90s as well. A lot of people don't know that the show Justified was actually inspired by one of his novels, Fire in the Hole. So he has a lot of notoriety in the film and TV sphere already. He's a very celebrated novelist. And while the character of Ray Nicolette isn't someone that appears in all of his novels or anything like that, I think there's an easy workaround to turn it into sort of like a pseudo cinematic universe of sorts, where it's not a series from that character's perspective per se, but maybe he shows up in every single new movie, which I think is what a great cinematic universe should kind of be. A bunch of standalone movies that maybe have a few characters that come and go that slowly but kind of cryptically tie it all together. And I feel like that character of Ray Nicolette is that glue. And we saw it in those 2 movies already, Out of Sight and Jackie Brown. He was the glue that tied these 2 worlds together, kind of like this LA crime world saga of sorts. And I think there's a lot of room there, especially given Michael Keaton's talents as an actor and how nowadays, especially given his age, he's very reflective of his past roles in a way that I think could actually work and benefit these types of stories. So I would love to see something like that. I don't even know if it's possible, given Elmore Leonard's passing in 2013. I don't know how the rights to his novels are sitting right now, if any of this would even work. But selfishly, I would love to see something like this. And I think it could be a new sort of redefining of what a cinematic universe could be. I think that'd be a very interesting one.
Maybe this spin-off movie is done in a Birdman style of self-reflection on him playing those characters.
Maybe
that would be
instead of superhero movies. Let's get Inarritu on the line and do another version of this, where instead of playing an old superhero, he's playing an old FBI agent.
Exactly. He's just instead of roaming around backstage at the play, he's just roaming the streets of LA, fiddling with his badge and reflecting on his career.
Maybe Ray Nicolette in real life, but in the real life of this story, decided to retire being an agent and become an actor.
That's how we transitioned right into Birdman.
This is LA after all.
Exactly. No, that is a fascinating pick, though, especially because you're talking about 2 movies that, aside from the adaptation element of it, aren't related all that much. 2 very different directors, yet you have an actor playing the same character in both of them. That's not something that happens often. So to take that and use that as inspiration, I think is fantastic. That's an inspired pick. I do really like that a lot.
I think it'd be pretty cool.
All right. My number one, this is where I make people mad, and I apologize. I do apologize, but I'm going to bring it up anyway.
Okay.
I'm going to bring it up anyway.
Uh-oh. I'm scared.
My number one is Luke Skywalker. Yes, I know. I'm bringing up Luke again. Luke again.
I got to be honest, man. I did not expect this to be your number one.
Yeah, look, I know that the Skywalker saga has irritated people to death, and people are done with it. They are done with the Skywalkers. I understand. Totally get it. However, I do think there is something, and this is that very much spiritually ties to Andor. Because what I want with Luke isn't what is often being talked about with Luke in terms of let's explore him after Return of the Jedi. What are the adventures of him after that film? And maybe he gets into some duels or he's defeating syndicates as he, tries to live in peace in this new galaxy. I don't know. Like a lot of what people talk about with Luke doesn't really interest me all that much. There is really only one thing with Luke that I want to see explored. And that is missing context for me as it relates to The Last Jedi.
I knew that's where you were going to go with this. The second you mentioned Luke Skywalker, I knew it was this. Yeah.
I've talked about this a lot before, and I will die on this hill that The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi both are great. They're both really good.
That's the sequel trilogy. That's the sequel trilogy right there.
Exactly. I think they're both really, really good. There are certainly things to nitpick with the both of them. My nitpicks with The Last Jedi do revolve around Luke, but I'm not irritated like a lot of the fan base is, where people have lost their goddamn minds.
Yeah.
That is not me. I love what Rian Johnson is going for. Love it.
Yeah, you are
fundamentally.
You are not one of those not my Luke Skywalker kind of people.
Yeah. No, I do not that at all. I am not my Luke Skywalker guys.
Yeah, you're more so, why is this now our new Skywalker?
Yeah, that's it. I love the idea. I just want to know how Luke got to this point, because I don't think that The Last Jedi does a great job of giving us that context.
Yeah, it doesn't do enough work.
Because the last time that we saw Luke on screen, he defeats the Emperor specifically, by removing his fear and letting love fuel his motivations, thus saving his father and having this incredible moment with him right before he died. That's how we remember Luke. So when we get to The Last Jedi and he's this rugged old man who is jaded, we come to find out through flashback scenes in The Last Jedi that there was something tragic that happened between him and his nephew, Ben Solo.
Yeah.
Now, Ben, as a promising young Force user, is not nearly as powerful. Not nearly. I don't even know if there are words to describe the discrepancies of defeating Palpatine and, in a way, Darth Vader, two of the most powerful figures as established through the lore of Star Wars. There's no one that can defeat these two except for Luke. And he has to do it in a very specific way. So that's the lesson that he learns. That's not something you're going to forget. That is deeply embedded into your DNA. Think about the biggest challenges, the biggest hurdles in your life. What you learned, those are life-changing. Those do not leave you. Those don't leave you. So he wouldn't have just forgot how he defeated Palpatine and saved his father. No, that's going to stick with him every day the rest of his life. Ben is a young Padawan that is still learning to be a Force user. He is at a literal school. So why are you deathly afraid of him? You give into your fear to Ben when, again, at the core of who you are, you overcame fear to defeat a Palpatine and a Darth Vader. So what changed? Again, I love the idea. I'm not saying don't do that.
Yeah,
I just
and don't
I wanna know,
course correct what happened in that movie. Don't try
yeah,
to
exactly.
fix it, but just try to fill in the gaps that
I just
movie
want
was
to
not
know what
able to do.
happened. Exactly. I just want to know what happened because you're talking about, and I'm not even talking about Star Wars lore or plotting. I'm talking about at the individual level, at the human level.
Mhm.
When like again, those pivotal life altering moments that make you who you are, that's that's just not undermined overnight. And that's something that The Last Jedi just doesn't, like, it refuses to give us that element of it. So like I love the idea. I just want to know, and this is what I'm asking for with this spin-off movie or show, is to give us the specificity, the specifics, what experiences changed him to where he was deathly afraid of a young kid that doesn't have much power. I mean, and forget Palpatine and Vader. This kid
Right.
doesn't have an ounce of the power you do. You are Luke Skywalker. You are 80 times more powerful than Ben.
Mhm.
It's not even close. So why give in to your fear there? Like, that's what I want to know,
Yeah,
because the
yeah.
film doesn't do a great job of giving clarity to that.
Yeah.
That's all that I'm asking. I'm not asking to change, to your point, Brennan, I'm not asking to change anything. You don't have to retcon anything. All I'm asking for is the human element to provide that context, because I love what Rian Johnson is going for. I don't want that to be changed. And that's where I very much differ from a lot of people that are anti-Luke in this film. I differ from them in that regard, because I don't want that to change. I just want to know the emotional evolution that's missing in that film. That's all that I'm asking for here.
I think this makes a lot of sense, this pick. I also think it might be the most unfortunate pick of the entire night, because if this sequel trilogy was done right, we may not have needed a spinoff like this.
Well, and you're right. You're right, because The Rise of Skywalker could and should have done this.
Well, what really should have happened, at least what I think should have happened, is that JJ got to make his movie, The Force Awakens.
Yeah.
Rian Johnson came in and got to make his movie, The Last Jedi. Kathleen Kennedy saw what he was going to do and say, this is 2 movies worth of material. You get the final 2 movies here to close out this trilogy, and you need more work to fill in the gaps. And then you get those gaps.
Love that idea too.
Yeah, you get those gaps in the middle chapter, which essentially would function as The Last Jedi, and then that movie ends at the death of Snoke. And then you get whatever his third movie would be.
Yeah.
But
I
in the
think that's also, yeah.
But
I
given
agree.
the movie we ended up getting, we kind of need this spinoff of Luke Skywalker now.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's all that I'm asking for. And I love that idea. That's probably what they should have done in hindsight. Obviously, they went a different route. I think the plan was to bring in a third director,
Colin Trevorrow. Yeah.
Colin Trevorrow. And by all accounts, I haven't read his script that was leaked online, but I've heard from a lot of people that did read it, the ideas were actually really good. Now, could he follow through in execution?
Probably
That's
not.
maybe debatable. That's maybe
Probably
debatable.
not. I haven't read the script itself that leaked, but I did hear summaries of it, and it's a good story. I'll simply say that it makes sense and feels like a natural continuation of The Last Jedi. I don't know if it would have still filled in those necessary gaps that you're talking about with your pick here.
No. Yeah. I think because they went away from Rian Johnson, this would have been a thing regardless.
Yeah.
Which is why, maybe to your point, they probably should have just stuck with Rian Johnson and gave him a second go round at this to fill in those gaps.
Yeah.
Because I think on the whole, The Last Jedi is a really great movie. The Force Awakens, I think, is really great. I will die on the hill forever and ever and ever that those two films complement each other very, very well, more so than they ever get any credit for. really my only nitpick with The Last Jedi it just comes down to that. Because I love what he's going for, but I do want to know what that emotional change is. Because what we saw in Return of the Jedi is such a high and such a huge moment in Luke Skywalker's life, a young Luke Skywalker at that point. What changed? I would like to know.
Yeah.
And we just don't see it in The Last Jedi. But it does leave room for a spin-off show or movie to give us that. And I mean, and obviously Mark Hamill, we still have him. I think this is something we could do. And I know people are tired of the Skywalker stuff, but this one I do think is pivotal and necessary. And then from there, it can be done. Other than the Rey movie, I am admittedly excited for the Rey movie. Although I guess she's a Palpatine now, so doesn't really apply.
Yeah, I don't. I wonder, again, with all news of Star Wars now, is it even going to happen?
No, I don't think they're going to touch Luke again.
No, I'm talking about anything they announce, even the Rey movie.
Well,
is that still happening?
Well, maybe. Who knows? Who knows with Star Wars? Because Kathleen Kennedy, I think, is gone now, right? I think that's official.
I don't think it's official
just
yet.
Rumored.
I think it's rumored. I know a lot of the rumors were around her retirement, which she very aggressively debunked that. But just because she doesn't plan on retiring doesn't mean that she's going to be leaving Lucasfilm. That's a very different thing. She could still be in the business and maybe just not do Lucasfilm going forward. I don't know.
Okay.
There's a lot of uncertainty, I feel like. At least I don't think there's any certainty. Maybe there were some reveals that I just didn't hear about. So I don't know.
What I'm reading here, and again, I don't know if this is true, but what I'm reading here is that she's expected to step down from her role as the president of Lucasfilm at the end of 2025.
I think that's what I've heard as well.
So,
but I don't think, does that come from a very specific trade that's treating it like an official announcement, or is it really just more?
I'm reading this from Variety. So
okay. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. She's been doing it for over 10 years.
Yeah, this was February 25th of this year, according to Variety. I'm sure there are other sources, but that's the one I'm reading here.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see.
See.
I don't know what that's gonna look like moving forward with Star Wars. Perhaps that is why nothing seems to be moving forward. It's because everything at the top is ambiguous.
They're in space limbo right now.
They're in space limbo right now. So who knows? And I might have to take my words back a moment ago because I noted that I don't think they would touch Luke again, but they did do Luke again after The Last Jedi with season 3 of The Mandalorian.
And Ahsoka.
2? Yeah, I can't remember. Oh, and Ahsoka, yeah. And the one scene in Boba Fett, weirdly. That one weird episode about
Luke
The
still
Mandalorian
exists.
all of a sudden. Yeah. So they've brought him in a couple of times, I guess, since like on the TV side. So maybe they would touch this as a series or as a movie. I don't know.
Maybe
we'll see. But that's all that I'm asking for. Other than that, I love The Last Jedi and I love Force Awakens. That's all I'm asking for with Luke. But that's my number one.
There could have been more context to make it even better.
Yeah, that's it. All right, honorable mentions. What do you got for honorable mentions?
I don't have many. I will say there's one that I thought was easily going to be in your top 5. I'm surprised it wasn't. Sophia, played by Halle Berry in John Wick Chapter 3.
Yeah, that's very much on this list for me. That's probably my number 6. That, like when I said I had like 6 or 7 of them on here, probably 8 to your point. That was number 6 on here.
Her and her dogs. Yeah, would love to see that movie.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's because of the Andor thing, and I love, like, I cannot state enough how much I love Will Smith in iRobot. It is one of my favorite comedic performances.
He's really quite clever in that one.
Yeah, and so I thought that would be really fun. So I ended up including that. But yeah, like a 5B is yeah, Halle Berry and those dogs. Absolutely want to see that for sure.
All right, well that would be somewhere in my top 10. I don't know where it would rank though. But a few others I thought of here. I did mention Michael Keaton, so of course bringing it back to Batman. How about Catwoman? Batman Returns. Michelle
There you
Pfeiffer
go.
putting on the
Yeah.
mask once again. She still exists in that world.
Yeah.
I know I've talked about Nancy Myers' The Parent Trap quite a bit on this podcast. It's a movie I do quite love, but the characters of Chessie and Martin, played by Lisa Ann Walter and Simon Kuntz, who end up together in that movie, is sort of like a side romance. Maybe we can explore that further. And
Sure.
Lisa Ann Walter she's found some new success given the success of Abbott Elementary, which she's also on.
Sure. Yeah,
So there's definitely some potential to play there. Let's see what else. This one you might appreciate, JD. I don't know if you'd like to see this, but I think you'll appreciate the love of this particular movie, and that's the Royal Tenenbaums. What
Sure.
about someone like Chas, Ben Stiller, and maybe as like a father figure with this newly found clarity? Maybe the film can also function as a tribute to Gene Hackman as well. And his kids could be played by the same actors. They're a little bit older now, so there's maybe a little bit of room to play with there too.
I really did think of that film as well because I mean, honestly, any of the Tenenbaum family could work in this context, I think.
Well, and I feel like Wes Anderson's another one of those filmmakers that sort of fits into a similar thing I talked about earlier, where their filmography almost feels interconnected in a way. Like they almost function like their own cinematic universe. And I think Wes Anderson's another example of that. But yeah, there's a lot there with the Royal Tenenbaums to explore further. Let's see. What else? You mentioned Tom Hardy, so I'll go to another Tom Hardy role, the character of Eames from Inception.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe that's another one we can explore
Love that
too.
one.
Could be before, could be after, could be both. Make it a trilogy. I don't care.
Yeah.
The last honorable mention I have here, and then I'll toss it back to you. How about Igor Borisov from Anora?
Oh yeah, I love that pick.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
I think that one I'd like to see as a
That'd be fun.
prequel. I think a prequel more than anything else, because again, much like with your example of Lydia Tarr, I don't want to mess with the thematic and emotional ambiguities of that movie. Yeah. So something before leading up to that world.
Yeah, totally agree with that for sure. I mentioned Halle Berry earlier, or echoed your sentiment there. The next pick I have on my list would be Al Cody from Inside Llewyn Davis, the Adam Driver character.
Did he ever make it to outer space?
I don't know, but that one scene is, or I guess he's in it like 2 or 3 scenes, but like, my God, talk about a fascinating character. I would want to see more of him.
Space.
Just going around.
Space.
Yeah. Singing his songs, doing his thing. That would be a lot of fun.
I want to hear what his other songs sound like, if that's his bass voice for that song.
I just want the adventures of Al Cody. That's what I want to know.
I could picture him being like a voice actor for cartoons or something like that.
Yeah. Just so good. Captain Barbossa.
Oh, heck yeah.
I want a Captain Barbossa movie or trilogy. Like Jeffrey Rush as
there
that
we go.
character. He should have won Oscars. He should have been nominated and won Oscars for that performance. That character.
Okay,
Incredible.
Disney, are you listening? If you have to reboot the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, just go back to Barbossa.
There.
He's right there.
Just go to Barbossa. I freaking love him as that character. It's so good. I want a series or a movie with Barbossa.
He's honestly he's the reason that the 5th Pirates movie doesn't suck.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It's not
hands
good.
down.
It's not good, but he makes it watchable.
Oh my gosh, very much so. I wholeheartedly agree. Going to the Rogue One. Well, again, Ben Mendelsohn as Krennic is so compelling. I know you haven't seen season 2 yet,
right?
But I'm sure you're aware that Krennic shows up in season 2, and Ben Mendelsohn is off his rocker. He is so fascinating as that character, endlessly watchable. I love him. For him to have his own dedicated series or show, I just think would be remarkable for his performance. And also, someone pointed this out on social media, and I think it's also incredible. He's a character that is ambitious and working toward a goal, and yet everyone whether it be in Rogue One or in Andor, no one really likes him. Like everyone finds him irritating.
That's funny.
It's just so funny. Yeah. Like there's
Amazing.
something about that dynamic with Mendelsohn's performance that is so immensely entertaining. So I think a Krennic show would be awesome.
Okay.
Would love to see that. I want to go to the world of Pacific Rim again.
Oh, you
but-
have to. You have to. I know you do.
And like maybe specifically the early days when the monsters first show up. And, you know, like you get that beginning montage at the beginning of the first Pacific Rim.
True.
And it just kind of goes through exposition and you sort of see it through like news footage or whatever.
Yeah, it kind of just drops you into an existing world. But what led to that existing world?
But I would like to know like those early days, like how they came up with the inception of the Jaeger program, what those early days were really like, what the pilots went through, you know, like maybe the first victories they had. We know eventually a lot of those pilots, if not all of them, would eventually die, you know, taking the film's lore at face value. But I think exploring those early days could be really compelling. I think that would be a lot of fun.
Okay.
So I'd like to go back to that. Well, and another one I had on here, I have two more. So Moneyball. I love Moneyball.
Oh, okay.
I'm not a huge baseball guy, as I mentioned earlier. Right. So this is a different kind of spinoff. What I'm asking for here, this is a little outside the premise that we've established, because I'm not necessarily asking for a spinoff character as much as I'm thinking of a spinoff idea, like the same idea, but in the world of the NHL, because it's very applicable. Moneyball has jumped the shark from baseball. It's certainly gone into other sports. Analytics in so many ways rules today's NHL as well. And I want to see like the hockey version of that. Like just, again, that's one of those Dunkirk selfish picks that I just want to see.
The whole point of this. Yeah, I could see that. I could see JD Duran written all over that one.
Yeah. There's not a lot of hockey movies. So it's kind of like the dogfighting thing it's just so ripe for another movie.
What's technically the most successful hockey movie ever made? Inside Out 2?
It's certainly up there. I mean, Miracle is probably the right answer for that. But like Miracle came out 20 years ago.
Sure.
Like how many hockey movies have we seen in the last 20 years? Genuinely. Can you count them on one hand?
And honestly, the one that most people would know is not technically a hockey movie per se, and that being Inside Out 2, even though it really is kind of a hockey movie, but it didn't market itself as one. Yeah,
there's just not a lot of them. Not a lot of them at all. I mean, and maybe some that comes down to hockey not being the most popular sport. I mean, we don't really get a lot of sports movies in general anymore.
It's getting there, though. I mean,
I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, most sports movies we get these days are some version of MMA or boxing. Like that's still the most prominent one we get. But we don't even get like a lot of football movies anymore.
I was just going to say, I was about to say football, but now that we talk about that further, I don't recall a popular football movie over the past 20 years.
Yeah, they're just sports movies have kind of gone away.
Maybe? Yeah.
But that was still 2009, and that's less a football movie and more of like a family drama. Like the last time we saw like a real football movie that featured football. I mean, I don't know. I can't think of one offhand.
Air Bud Golden Receiver.
I mean, was Friday Night Lights the last football movie we got?
True football movie? Probably. That was at 2006, 2004, somewhere around that time frame.
At any rate, I would like to see another hockey movie and a Moneyball version, maybe more specifically. Okay. And then the last one, this is a little bit of I just want to get back into that world again as well. And maybe it's because we just celebrated its 10th anniversary. I want to get back into the world of Fury Road again.
The Wasteland.
The Wasteland. Like it doesn't have to be Furiosa. I'm not asking for Furiosa. I'm not asking for Max even, although it could be Max because, again, even in Fury Road, he takes a back seat to Fury. Yeah, he's a side character. So maybe it could be Max. Maybe Max is more appropriate here than any other character in that film.
Maybe.
But just anybody. Like, you can pick anybody. I just want to get back to the Wasteland, selfishly, with George Miller.
Yeah.
And his madness.
The early life of a Morton Joe.
There you go. Yeah, I thought about that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, or one of the
what
war
did he
pups.
look like before the mask?
Yeah. You could get into all that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's plenty to explore there. So
now that it would have to be directed by George Miller. I don't trust that world in anyone else's
with anybody
hands.
else. It'd have to be George Miller. Yeah, I agree. Let's get back to the Miller well.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go ahead and end it there as we're getting a little long here. So that is our top 5 movies or characters that we want to see get the Andor treatment. Let us know what you think of our list. You can leave a comment below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky. You can always email us insessionfilm@gmail.com as well. So that'll do it for this week's show.
Mm-hmm.
We do have a couple of reviews this week. We are going to be talking about the French film Jane Austen Wrecked My Life. So we're going to give that one a go. And then we're also going to be talking about Final Destination Bloodlines. Although I will not be there for that conversation. It'll be Brendan and one of our writers is going to be joining Brendan for that. So you can be on the lookout for those reviews coming this week. We'll also have a new Women in Session. And we are also planning a new Chasing the Gold. It probably will happen next week. But one of our writers, Hector, is over at Con right now. And he's going to join me because Shadon is traveling right now. She's going to be gone for a few months. So I am going to host Chasing the Gold for an episode. I'm going to talk to Hector about Con, get his thoughts, his favorites from over there, what he did not like. But he has a bunch of reviews up at insessionfilm.com that you can go and check out. So that is the slate for this week. Be on the lookout for all of that. Again, I want to urge everyone to go and sign up to be an In Session Film VIP, Patreon, YouTube membership, Apple Podcast subscription, however you want to become an In Session Film VIP, bonus content, Mission Impossible ranking. Go and check that out. Brendan, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Well, speaking of the Cannes Film Festival, Ari Aster has a new film out, Eddington. Big shock of the entire festival. Yeah. The movie's divisive.
I know, crazy. Nobody saw that coming. Not a single person.
I'm shocked.
I know. What a surprise. I know, it's crazy. Looking forward to that one, I guess.
Not looking forward to the discourse, but I'm looking forward to the movie.
I know. A lot of what I've seen out of there has been a little bit of, oh yeah, that was into, same thing with like the Phonition scheme, people talking about Wes Anderson.
Yeah.
I feel like we all predicted how that would go as far as the general discourse, so I'm not too surprised by that either.
It seems as though maybe the biggest surprise in the negative direction thus far is the new film from Julia Ducournau, Alpha,
I just
which is
that.
getting kind of panned right now.
Yeah, that dropped just before we started recording this episode, and the reactions are not very good.
Yeah.
So that is unfortunate. Yeah. We shall see. We'll probably get that later on this year or later on in the summer. But at any rate, we'll talk more about the Cannes films as they come for sure.
Yeah.
With all of that said, thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the In Session Film Podcast.